It's good stuff. Baked potatoes, pie with kasha. No thanks, really. I'm sorry to keep on opening the door and letting in the cold. I want to take up as much water as I can. I've cleaned the bathtub, now I'm filling that and the wash tubs. I'll come in half a dozen times and then I won't trouble you again for a long time. Forgive me for bothering you like this, but I can't get water anywhere else. Help yourself. If you asked for syrup, we haven't got any, but there's plenty of water. Take as much as you like, we won't even charge you for it. They all laughed. When Yuri Androvich came for the third time to fill his fifth and sixth buckets, the tone had changed. My sons-in-law have been asking me who you are. I told them but they don't believe me. You go on running the water, don't mind me. Only don't slop it on the floor, clumsy. Don't you see, you've splashed some in the doorway. If it freezes over I can't see you coming to hack it up with a crowbar. And shut the door properly, you oaf, there's a draft coming in. Yes, sir, I was telling them who you are but they won't believe it. The money that was spent on you. All that learning, and where has it got you? I'd like to know. When Yuri Androvich came in for the fifth or sixth time, Markel frowned. Just once more and that's that. There's a limit to everything, old man. If our little marina didn't keep sticking up for you, I'd lock the door, no matter how high-born you are. You remember our marina, don't you? There she is, the dark one at the end of the table. She's gone all red, look. Don't hurt his feelings, Dad, she keeps telling me. As if anybody wants to hurt your feelings. She's a telegrapher at the Central Post Office, she knows foreign languages. He's unfortunate, she says. She's so sorry for you, she'd go through fire and water for you. As if I'm to blame that you're a poor fish. You shouldn't have run away to Siberia, leaving your house at a bad time. It's your own fault. Look at us here, we sat it out through the famine and the white blockade. We didn't flinch, so here we are, safe and sound. Blame yourself. If you'd taken proper care of Tonya, she wouldn't be traipsing abroad now. Well, it's your business, what do I care? Only what I'd like to know, begging your pardon, is what do you want with all this water? Hired yourself out to make a skating rink or something? You and your water. I can't even get mad at you, you're such a wet rag. Again they all laughed. Marina, however, looked around angrily, flared up, and began to chide them. Yuri Androvich was astonished by the sound of her voice, though he could not as yet have said why. There's a lot of cleaning to be done in the house, Markel. I've got to scrub the floors and wash some of my things as well. The Chapovs were amazed. Aren't you ashamed of yourself, saying such things, let alone doing them? You'll be starting a Chinese laundry next. Let me send my daughter up, said Agafia. She'll do your washing and scrubbing, and your mending, if there is any. You don't need to be afraid of him, my dear. You can see how well brought up he is, he wouldn't hurt a fly. What an idea, Agafia Tihonovna. I wouldn't dream of letting Marina do my scrubbing. Why on earth should she dirty her hands for me? I'll manage all right. You can dirty your hands and I can't, is that it? Marina broke in. Why are you so difficult, Yuri Androvich? Would you really drive me out if I came up to see you? Marina could have been a singer. She had a pure, well-modulated voice of great range and strength. She did not speak loudly, but her voice gave the impression of being stronger than was needed for ordinary conversation. It seemed to have a life of its own, as though it did not belong to her. It seemed to come from behind her back or from the next room. This voice was her protection, her guardian angel. No one could wish to hurt or distress a woman with such a voice. It was from this water carrying on a Sunday that a friendship sprang up between the doctor and Marina. She would often come and help him with his housework. One day she stayed with him and did not again go back to the lodge. Thus she became Yuri Andreevich's third wife, though he was not divorced from the first, and they did not register their marriage. They had children. Markel and Agafia spoke of their daughter, not without pride, as the doctor's wife. Her father grumbled that there had never been a proper wedding either in church or at the registry, but his wife said, "Are you out of your mind? With Tonia still alive, that would be bigamy." "It's you that's stupid," said Markel. "What's Tonia got to do with it? It's just the same as if she were dead. There's no law to protect her." Yuri Andreevich sometimes said jokingly that theirs was a romance in 20 buckets, as you might have a novel in 20 chapters. Marina forgave the doctor his eccentricities, the dirt and disorder he made in the house, his moods and his fancies. They were those of a man who was letting himself go and knew it. She bore with his grumbling, his tempers, and his nerves. Her devotion went even further. At times they were destitute through his fault. And in order not to leave him alone at such moments, she would give up her own job at the post office, where her work was so highly thought of that she was always taken back after her enforced absence. In obedience to Yuri Andreevich's whim, she would go out with him, doing odd jobs from house to house. They chopped wood for a good many of the tenants on the different floors. Some of them, particularly speculators who had made fortunes at the beginning of the NEP and artists and scholars who were close to the government, were setting up house on a comfortable scale. One day Yuri Andreevich and Marina, stepping carefully in their felt boots so as not to dirty the carpet with sawdust, were carrying wood into the study of a tenant who remained insultingly engrossed in something he was reading and did not honor them with so much as a glance. It was his wife who gave the orders and who paid them. What has the pig got his nose in? The doctor wondered. The scholar was scribbling furiously in the margins of his book. As he passed him with a bundle of logs, Yuri Andreevich glanced over his shoulder. On the desk lay a pile of the early editions of the booklets that he had written and Vasia had printed. 7. Yuri Andreevich and Marina were now living in Spiridonovka Street, and Gordon had a room in Malaya Bronaya Street nearby. Marina and the doctor had 2 daughters, Kapka, Kapitolina, who was 5 years old, and the baby Klashka, Claudia, who was only 6 months. The early summer of 1929 was very hot. People who lived in the same neighborhood would go to see each other, hatless and in their shirt sleeves. Gordon's room was part of a curious structure, which had once been the premises of a fashionable tailor. The shop had been on 2 floors, connected by a spiral staircase, and both looking out onto the street through one large plate glass window, on which the tailor's name and occupation were traced in gold letters. The premises were now divided into 3. By means of floorboards, an extra room had been fitted into the space between the lower and the upper levels. It had what was, for a living room, a curious window, about 3 feet high, starting at floor level and with part of the gold letters remaining. From outside through the gaps in the lettering, anyone in the room could be seen up to the knees. This was Gordon's room. With him at the moment were Zhivago, Dudorov, Marina, and the children, who, unlike the grown-ups, were entirely visible through the glass. Marina soon left with the little girls, and the 3 men remained alone. They were having one of those unhurried, lazy summer conversations that go on between men who were at school together and have many years of friendship behind them. To carry on a conversation naturally and intelligently, a man must have an adequate supply of words. Of the three, only Yuri Androvich answered this requirement. The other two were always at a loss for an expression. They did not possess the gift of eloquence. At a loss for words, they paced up and down, puffed at their cigarettes, gesticulated, and repeated themselves. Opening parenthesis. That, plainly, is dishonest, old man. Dishonest, yes, yes, that's what it is, dishonest. Closing parenthesis. They were unaware that such dramatic excesses, far from showing their warmth and breadth of character, expressed intellectual poverty. Both Gordon and Dudorov moved among cultured academicians. They spent their lives among good books, good thinkers, good composers and good music, which was as good yesterday as today. But always good. Closing parenthesis. And they did not know that the misfortune of having average taste is a great deal worse than the misfortune of having no taste at all. Neither Dudorov nor Gordon realized that even their admonitions to Zhivago were prompted less by a friendly wish to influence his conduct than by their inability to think with freedom and to guide the conversation at will. Like a runaway cart, the conversation took them where they did not want to go. Unable to steer it, they were bound, sooner or later, to bump into something, and to be hit. And so, in their sermonizing, time and again they got off the tracks. To Zhivago, their unconscious motives, their artificial emotionalism, and their strained reasoning were transparent. But he could hardly say to them, "Dear friends, how desperately commonplace you are, you and your circle, the names and the authorities you always quote, the glamour and art which you so much admire. The only bright and vital thing about you is that you are my contemporaries and friends." How could anyone confess to such a thought? So, in order to spare their feelings, he listened meekly. Dudorov had recently come back from his first deportation. His civil rights had been restored, and he had been allowed to resume his regular work at the university. Now he was telling his friends about his experiences as a deportee. He spoke sincerely and without hypocrisy. He was not motivated by fear. He really believed in what he was saying. He said that the arguments of the prosecution, his treatment in prison and after he came out, and particularly his private talks with the examining judge had aired his brains, re-educated him politically, opened his eyes to many things he had not seen before, and made him more mature as a person. These reflections appealed to Gordon just because they were so hackneyed. He nodded his head with sympathy and agreed with Dudorov in everything. It was the very triteness of the feelings and expressions that moved him most. He mistook Dudorov's reflection of prescribed feeling for a genuine expression of humanity. Dudorov's pious platitudes were in the spirit of the times. But it was precisely their conformism, their transparent sanctimoniousness, that exasperated Yuri Androvich. Men who are not free, he thought, always idealize their bondage. So it was in the Middle Ages, and later the Jesuits always exploited this human trait. Zhivago could not bear the political mysticism of the Soviet intelligentsia, though it was the very thing they regarded as their highest achievement, or as it would have been called in those days, the spiritual ceiling of the age. But this he also kept to himself in order not to hurt the feelings of his friends. What did interest him in Dudorov's story was his account of a cellmate of his, Bonifati Orlovtsov, a follower of Tikhon, the Patriarch of Moscow. Orlovtsov had a 6-year-old daughter, Christina. The arrest and subsequent fate of her beloved father had been a terrible blow to her. Terms such as obscurantist priest and disenfranchised seemed to her the stigma of dishonor. Dudaroff felt that in her childish ardor she had vowed someday to remove that stigma from her family name. This goal, conceived at such an early age and nursed with burning resolution, made of her even now an enthusiastic champion of communist ideals. "I must go," said Yuri Androvich. "Don't be cross with me, Misha. It's hot and stuffy in here. I need to get some air. But the window is open. Look, down there on the floor. I'm sorry, we've been smoking too much. We keep forgetting that we shouldn't smoke with you here. It isn't my fault that it gets so stuffy, it's the idiotic way the window is made. You should find me another room. I must be off, Misha. We've talked enough. Thank you both for your concern. I'm not pretending, you know. It's an illness I've got, sclerosis of the heart. The walls of the heart muscle wear out and get thin, and one fine day they may burst. I'm not yet 40, you know, and it isn't as if I were a drunkard, or burned the candle at both ends. Nonsense. We aren't playing your funeral march yet. You'll last us out. Microscopic forms of cardiac hemorrhages have become very frequent in recent years. They are not always fatal. Some people get over them. It's a typical modern disease. I think its causes are of a moral order. The great majority of us are required to live a life of constant, systematic duplicity. Your health is bound to be affected if, day after day, you say the opposite of what you